What's up, guys? Thanks for joining in with me on another episode of my high performance podcast. And today I've got a really exciting one, actually. And I think I might name this series the Trailblazer series. Today I'm joined by one of my good friends, but also a runner who recently completed the Bali Hope Ultra, which is a coast to coast run, which is about 85 kilometers. And he was able to not only break the record by an hour, but complete it in 7 hours and 21 minutes. Daniel Lucchini, welcome to my podcast.
Hey Phil, thanks for having me, man.
So guys, Dan is somebody that I've known even before he was a runner. And just so you guys have an understanding of what this man has been able to accomplish in his young career, he's only 31, is he has been a strength athlete. He has coached rugby teams. He has coached strength and conditioning for basically the entire time I've known him. He's worked with Olympic level boxers as well. And now he turns most of his coaching time towards recreational to competitive runners. And he's also become a runner himself to the competitive level and potentially even on a professional level, which is incredible to me because Dan actually started off as a strength athlete. Initially, Dan was actually a powerlifter.
Seems like a lifetime ago.
Yeah, so the reason I wanted to bring this up, guys, is because not many people ever transition from being a high-level strength athlete, from pulling 300 kilos, which is what Dan could do, to running a marathon that is more than a normal marathon. We call these the ultra marathons. And not only has he done an 85-kilometer run in Bali recently, but he's also done a 24-hour run. And Dan, can you remember how long you ran for? How many kilometers you did in that run?
Yeah, I did 170.3 that day.
173.3 kilometers in 24 hours. And you also did a 100-kilometer run in Perth, for which you also got first place, right?
First race, first place. That was the one.
First race, first place. So much to explore with such a diverse sports person like yourself, but also the coaching aspect that you bring into with all your athletes. So once again, guys, I want to welcome Dan to the show, and I want to get straight into everything that he's been doing, especially on this running front. So Dan, one of the things I really wanted to ask you about and get the people listening to explore is, before you became this runner, like, what were you doing?
I've done a few things. I tend to sort of go all in on something for a while and then sort of realize if that's what I want to continue with or not. So yeah, I sort of played sports growing up all the time and then just got into the gym after that. And, as we met at Adonis, became a strength athlete. So I was powerlifting, did that for a number of years until it got to a point where it just wasn't feeling the same. Like I didn't enjoy it as much. And, as well, we tried some jujitsu and I had some injury issues there. And that sort of got frustrating. So I gave up on that one. And then I gradually started sort of moving into, I guess, movement culture, which is like handstands, gymnastic type movements, and things like that. And then, yeah, eventually found running, which I tried for a while, hated, stopped, did sprinting, and then eventually came back to endurance running because my training was missing something that only it could offer, which was that sort of, it sounds silly, but the endurance factor of it, like the mental endurance and obviously the physical. And then that whole time as well, I've been coaching, using the skills that I'm developing to then develop that knowledge to pass on to others.
You just said something really interesting to me. You went to endurance running, you hated it, and then you came back. Can you tell me, when you left it, was it just because it was, actually, a better question would be, what did you hate about it?
Yeah, I'm someone who can't be bored. I'm a very busy, all the time doing something type person. And, I do try and practice sort of stillness things, but they're not the comfort place for me. So that's why I like powerlifting, which was short, sharp bursts, really aggressive, full energy, kind of suited my personality more, I thought. So then when I went to endurance running, I just found it incredibly boring. I did that 24-hour run and broke my foot halfway through, and it was just a bad experience. I got to the end and I was just couldn't be bothered for it anymore. I kept getting injuries on my feet and my ankles, and I just looked for the easy way out. So that was stopping, and took on another, I guess, running based activity in sprinting, which lasted a while. Did that for a year, proved my time to sort of a goal, and moved on.
What I find funny, because I know you, is you went from strength athlete to running endurance, and then you decided to cap off your journey by running for 24 hours. That's not what most people do. What most people do is they go run a half marathon or a marathon. Why did you go to 24 hours?
Yeah. I actually skipped the marathon altogether. Actually, I went half marathon, then 50K, then 100K, then 24 within the first 18 months or something.
Which is insane, by the way, for anybody who does not know about running performance. That's just crazy.
Probably hence the broken foot. But it wasn't the last. But like you said, you know me. I like to take things to the extreme. I sort of hit ceilings and realize that there's probably another ceiling above it if I just break through that one. And I'm always trying to get the most out of something that I can. Whether it's like cooking at home, I'm always trying to one up myself, or work. Find myself doing more hours than I probably should, and always trying to be the best at everything I do, or the best version of me at everything I do. So for me, the interest in long distance and what I could offer came from a pretty cliche figure in the endurance running world, but listening to David Goggins' book kind of made me look at running as, the pinnacle for me is how far can I go? Because that was the part I hated about it, right? It was the like long, boring activity. So I'm like, okay, let's do the longest, most boring activity possible and try to get comfortable there and not suffer because of the boredom. And then from there, it's even developed into, okay, now it's like, cool, how deep can I push into that? Like now that I'm not going to do races that are longer than 24 hours, maybe a little bit, but now it's like, how long can I sustain a high level of hurt during that? So that's where it just keeps developing from there.
Is it still boring for you?
Yeah, incredibly.
Sorry, guys, I just coughed. It's still boring for you now.
I still don't necessarily enjoy running. Like, I'd be lying if I said there wasn't small moments of joy where you just get exhilarated, but most of the time I don't really like going for a run.
How many times do you run per day right now?
One to probably about 12 sessions a week.
12 sessions a week. So sometimes you're running twice a day, yeah?
Most days, yeah.
Yeah. So even me saying that sounds ridiculous. How many times per day do you run? It's usually how many times per week do you run? I'm asking how many times per day do you run?
Yeah. Well, we've got quite a streak going.
Yeah. What's your streak so far?
853 or 4 today.
So 800 and something days that you have ran nonstop every single day.
Yeah. And the parameters are just at least 30 minutes of continuous running.
Okay. High bar you set for yourself.
Yeah. But it's kind of cool. Like going for a 30-minute run has now become a rest day. Like it changes your perspective a lot.
Yeah, I feel that the same way when it comes to training for me as well. A rest day is not a rest day typically for most people, because our perception of what is considered rest is a lot higher than what other people consider rest. Like even if you tell me to take 6 hours off and not do anything and lie in bed, that's rest to me. And then I'm happy to go for a short jog or go lift some weights. That doesn't bother me.
I think it accelerates everything. You can sit down for an hour and recharge as much as someone else can in 3. So it's like now I can go out of the day without overreaching myself.
Yeah. which we can talk to you about adaptations later on. But maybe we won't keep it too performance-based this episode. I think it's better we just talk about the psychology and the journey of your running. So now let's go to, you finish your sprint training. You got done with that, and then you went back. Tell me about that decision to go back, because that's what started all of this.
Yeah. Look, I guess now that I'm even thinking about it, there's a really common theme when I start losing interest in something, and it happens to be injury. Because I realized I sort of had some Achilles issues with the sprinting towards the end. Again, I push myself to the limit, and oftentimes you go past the limit trying to find it. And yeah, I kind of just gave up on it in the sense that there wasn't enough there for it to be worth pushing through that. And in that 10 months that I did sprinting, I'd reflected on how I went about my running and thought that I could do it better this time. I wanted to do it without injury or without, hurting myself. So that was probably about 2 months of thinking about it. Had a coach at the time, and our coaching contract ended at that time. So I was like, cool. After that, I'm going back to endurance running.
And when you went back, did you already set the goal of 100 kilometers in Perth, or were you just running again?
Yeah, so initially, I think I started in maybe August or September, and probably by like the second week of coming back, I set myself a challenge. So that was the 9 marathons in 9 cities in 9 days, and that eventually happened in April. So I gave myself 6 months to prepare for that. And yeah, actually the first day of prep was a Monday, and on the Sunday I was working on my camper van that we're going to be living out of from April, and I cut my finger and had to have surgery. So my first day of prep was done with a cast, and I had to like run with my arm, elevated above my shoulder. That was the first week or so.
Tell me what happens in your mind when that happens. You've cut your finger, you've had surgery, you're probably not even off the pain medication if you were on something, and you decide to run the next day. How did you overcome that thought in your mind saying, Dan, you've just cut your finger? Most people in the world would say, I've just had surgery, I'm not going to go for a training run.
Yeah, honestly, it's a pretty quick like, oh shit, this is all messed up, to, yeah, I shouldn't be able to go for a run tomorrow. So let's see if I can. Like, one of my values that in life is to interrogate norms, interrogate what's believed or understood. And, through that interrogation, sometimes it's right. And maybe I shouldn't have run that day. Maybe I risked damaging the finger more, but I didn't. It's fine. So, hey, it was a worthy gamble, I guess.
I think so, because even from my own medical background or health background as being a physio, there's so many times when I would just tell someone with a foot injury or a back injury, what's wrong with your arms? Go train your arms. What's wrong with your abs? Go train your abs. There's so many things you can do. And I suppose what you described is no different, except maybe in your case, I would have been concerned with possible infection from sweating.
Yeah, that was the one thing I was concerned about too.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like there's always something you can do. And as soon as you start thinking with that mindset, you're just looking for how to make it happen. I'm like, cool. All I have to do is put sports tape around my hand and strap it to my other arm so that because the other thing they said was the jolting could dislodge the stitches. I'm like, okay, let's not let it jolt. And then as far as like the infection goes, there's a lot of antiseptic went on the finger that day.
Yeah, well, it is what it is, sort of thing, right? You just go for it, and if it gets infected, so be it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, someone's got to find out at some stage.
Yeah, yeah. Although don't take this as medical advice.
No. We're not the right people to take medical advice from.
No.
So
Your body, your choice.
yeah, exactly. So what happened when you decided to sign up for the Perth 100?
Yeah, so
and you
that
came
was
first. So what happened
like
there?
a year later, that one. So we did the traveling, went
Yeah.
around. I had a
Yeah.
couple of races cancelled that I wanted to do while traveling. So as soon as I got to Perth, I just found the first race that I could. And that happened to be, it was called the Australia Day Ultra back then. Now it's the True Blue Ultra.
Okay. And when you signed up to this, Was it a decision made to just push yourself, or was it more one of those decisions where it was very competitive? You want to be the best?
Yeah, look, a bit of both, to be honest. So the last 3 months of the travel while we're heading to Perth, I had a broken foot again. And I'd continued to run on it. And it had just been a really frustrating 3 months of like a couple good days and then a lot of really hard runs. And it just felt like rubbish. And when I got to Perth, I sort of gave myself 2 weeks of the minimum training. So it was just 30 minutes a day to keep the streak. And that was it. And I was just getting frustrated that it wouldn't get better. So I was like, what if I just give my body like an extra reason to heal? So I'll sign up for a race. And I only had like, I think 10 weeks to prep for it. So, broken foot can take what, up to 6 to 12 weeks to heal. So I was like, let's just accelerate it. And that was on the Saturday. Sunday, it was still super sore. And I went to run on Monday and I did not feel any pain in that foot for the rest of the prep.
That's very strange.
I'm talking, it was like a balloon 3 days earlier.
That's very strange.
Yeah, you're telling me.
I mean, there's two things that are strange about that. The first one is you said to yourself, let's give my body a reason to heal. So let's sign up for a 100K race. That's the first strange reason. And then the second strange one is exactly what you said, that it just stopped hurting.
Yeah, but I think I know it sounds silly, like giving my body a reason, but I could probably recall at least another 3 preps where the week before prep began, I had some kind of niggle. And the week that I start, I just choose that that's the day I'm starting. All of a sudden, it's better. Not necessarily that I think the body's healing faster, but the nervous system is sending a signal in a different way. You're switching that off by turning into like competition mode. So that answers your question more about the 100K. I was like, yeah, I want to be competitive. Like, I don't do anything to come second. And it's not about winning, but it's the intention of trying to come first is going to bring out, either cause me to crumble or bring out the best in me.
It brought out the best in you.
It ended pretty well, yeah.
Yeah. I can understand what you're saying, because for me, it happens on game day, especially. On game day, whenever I fought or whenever I had to compete, it didn't matter if I was in pain. In fact, it felt like I didn't feel anything. I didn't train pain-free though. I would just compete pain-free, even though 2 days ago I had pain. But on the day, it just didn't matter. Just the adrenaline and whatever happens to you psychologically when you enter that space, you just don't feel anything.
Yeah, there's something to it for sure.
Yeah, for sure. So after you do the 100K race, let's now move into the Bali Hope Ultra. Yeah. So you've done the 100K. You've come first race, first place.
Yeah.
How did the Bali Hope Ultra even cross your mind?
Yeah, so I saw it online a few years ago and it looked like an interesting project. And, we talked about the 24-hour run and the 9 marathons. They were both charity events. So I already liked tying in running, which in many ways is a super selfish action. It takes a lot of time. Tying into something where I can give back through what I'm doing. I'm going to run anyway, but I may as well try and give back. So I saw the Bali Hope and knew it was a charity run and it looked cool. And the videos they put up are awesome. It's in Bali. So I kind of always wanted to do it. And then I think it was maybe not long after the Australia Day Ultra, really, maybe a couple months, my wife and I, Christina, were talking about having a holiday, and we talked about the time of year we wanted to go, and I saw a post advertising entries were open for the next year for the Bali Hope, and kind of all just worked out together. I was like, I need another race to look forward to next year, and it's also a holiday, and I don't know, timing, Perth being close to Bali helped, and I'd obviously just moved here, so yeah, it all sort of worked together. It was a big financial investment and we're in a good enough position to do it then. So yeah, it all came together, all fell into place.
Okay. So the Bali Hope Ultra, we already mentioned it's a 85-kilometer race. But what exactly is the charity component of this race?
Yeah, so the Bali Hope Ultra is more than a race. And I read that before going in, and to me, it wasn't. It was just a race where I had to do other stuff in between. But now that I've done it, I can truly say it is far beyond that. So it's a 7-day experience in Bali where we all come together. There's 28 runners who eventually will compete against each other, but we're all there for one purpose, which is to raise money and awareness for the Bali Children's Foundation. And through our donations, they bring one community, or aim to bring one community sort of out of poverty through improved schooling and education for children, and offering things to that community to help them.
Okay. So you would run, and then people would donate to your cause, like you, and then that money would be brought towards the Bali communities.
Yeah, exactly. So, we embark on what is a tough, challenging effort, which can inspire feelings of awe and inspiration from others, which hopefully, encourages them to donate. And that's why we can sort of tie something like endurance running to charity events, because it creates that camaraderie between people watching someone else, give it their all.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that there's many reasons why you want to help other people, many ways to help other people. And if running something ridiculous like 85 kilometers in 7 hours and 21 minutes is something that gets eyeballs, then might as well use those eyeballs to help people.
Yeah, it's charitable attention seeking.
Yeah, exactly. Cool. So now let's talk about the training. So you signed up for this ultra, which is at that point, how many months away?
I probably signed up in April, so about 12 months away.
12 months. Okay. All right. Let's talk about the training. What was the training like for you leading up to that?
Well, after the Australia Day Ultra, which is in January last year, I had another 4 races on my calendar. I had to pull out of the first one because of injury, and then I had 3 races cancelled for the rest of the year. So I never actually got to race. So I spent pretty much all of last year in training prep, but we've never actually getting to race. So after the last one got cancelled in November, I took basically December off prep, not off training, but off prep. And then once I got back, it was January, so I gave myself 20 weeks of prep for the actual event. Although I'd been prepping for 12 months, really.
Okay. Okay. How did you maintain your drive to train when all these events started being cancelled?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I kind of didn't, which is an important factor in this story, I guess. But during last year, I stayed motivated. I was really starting to see some like significant progress, especially in my trail running ability, and that kept driving me. And I was determined to be competitive, and I kind of knew I had something there. Like there was just that fire just needed to be burnt. But in saying that, after the last one got cancelled last year, and it was just Bali left, that fire did diminish, especially because the races I was prepping for on paper were a lot harder. So one of them was 100-mile, or 2 of them were 100-mile events, a lot more difficult terrain, things like that. So I felt that the only one I had left was an easier option, and I'd missed out on the hard stuff. And just the mental drain that comes with one prepping, but then having it taken away from you. The last one was 8 hours before the event. So you're already so there, but you never get to do the thing, which is disappointing.
Mm-hmm. When you got up to run the next day, after you found out that another event had been cancelled, what's going through your mind?
Well, I ran twice the same day after I found out it was cancelled to start with. But yeah, initially, I was actually excited. Excited to sort of prove myself wrong again. Like, okay, this is ridiculous. Like, you have no reason to push yourself. So I actually went through probably 6 of the hardest weeks of training I've ever done in my life directly after. I just wanted to see how much I could do. I was very fit. I'd just come off a taper for the race, so I felt good at the start of the 6 weeks anyway. And then it was just, run as much as humanly possible, and then we'll prep for things. So I guess it was a freedom, especially the last month heading into a race where you start tapering. I felt like I wasn't getting that challenge, and I wasn't really pushing myself. And I wanted to feel that, and not getting to race and feel that, I just blasted it into training. So yeah, that really fired me up.
So you had the freedom to run as much as you could
Yeah.
after the event got cancelled.
Yeah, because I didn't have to worry about being ready for the race. I could just
Mm.
train freely. I didn't have a specific date that I had to make sure that I wasn't fatigued for or anything. I could just run.
Run.
And
Okay.
my volume went through the roof. It was ridiculous.
Give us an idea. How much was a heavy week
I was doing 20 hours a week
of
of
running?
just running and like a lot of heat suit running, stair runs, like as bonus sessions. I was training 44 hours a week total.
44 hours a week in total,
Yeah.
including your strength training sessions.
Strength training, bike, rower, elliptical, running, stairs,
Mm-hmm.
everything.
So I'm gonna take a slight off tangent, and then I'll come back to the running side. How did you manage to afford all this time? Because you also work full time, as I'm aware.
Yeah, so there was again sort of divine timing there. So I finished. So I run my own business. I've sort of run that, I guess, essentially full time. But working as a digital coach, you can sort of create your own hours. So I just fit things in around when I had time. But I was also studying all of last year, doing my master's in counselling, and I had work experience which finished up in November, and then I wasn't starting my job at the same place officially until the January of the next year. So I kind of had time that had just been given back to me, so just fit in there. But in general, I still, even now working a full-time and part-time job, I still train upwards of 33, 36 hours a week, and I just get up early and I don't waste time.
How early do you get up?
2:09 a.m.
2:09 a.m. And what time do you sleep?
before 7.
Okay, so you're still fitting in 8 hours of sleep almost.
7, yeah.
7 hours, which
Aim for
is
7
more than
hours.
what most people get.
Yeah, yeah. I have 45 minutes of downtime a day.
What do you do in your downtime?
Watch Netflix with my wife.
I see. 45 minutes of downtime a day because everything else is just used for something you're working towards.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Okay, that's incredible. For anyone listening, I'm sure you guys can all understand how incredible that is. Because I know I have a lot of time that I spend just doodling around.
Oh, and
Anyway,
I should also say that I am not a complete robot. I do have Saturdays completely off
okay,
work, just work. I still train, but yeah.
okay, I get that. Still, I think that's quite remarkable because I mean, we've spoken about this before, but would you consider that discipline?
In some respect, yeah. I think the way I use the time is discipline,
Mm-hmm.
um, rather than the actual habit of doing it. Because for me, like I said, I hate being bored. Like to me, that's scary. So I don't want to do nothing. And then I could try and do things like just watch a show or read a book or something. But then I have this little voice in the back of my head that says, you're wasting time, you're not being productive. So maybe it's discipline, maybe it's actually a fear. Definitely is a fear in there. So I think it's just a whole bunch of drives. Some
Yeah.
of them from a positive place and going to a positive place, and some of them potentially are negative or harmful. And I've dealt with that as well in different ways, and just recently had to make some changes because it wasn't all going so smoothly.
Let's tie that into going back to the training because I was going to ask you, I'm sure you would have had some atrocious training session going into the Bali Hope Ultra. Can you give us a few examples of just terrible training sessions and what you learned from those?
Yeah, so I guess in a whole, the first 6 weeks went really well, felt good, everything was going, decently, and then whether it just be the toil of the training or work was getting a lot busier, I was now sort of fully loaded with cases at my new job, and I had some health things that I was potentially dealing with, and just some bunch of life factors, finances, all the good stuff kind of hit at once, and all of a sudden it just became hard. So I think the hardest thing was just every day waking up and absolutely dreading going for a run. Like it wasn't just that I didn't want to do it, I dreaded it. Like the only thing that kept me going was the dense habit that I have. You know, I was wake up at 2:09, I'm out the door by 2:18. There's no time to think and doubt yourself in that. And it's just start. So I just forced myself into that. But then as the prep went on, it only got worse. Like I'd had some sort of like 5-6 hour runs on the weekends with my longest runs. And towards the end, every step felt like a chore. There was no, oh, you know, it's already been 10 minutes. It was no, it's been 10 seconds. You have to focus on every step. So the mental drain was just ridiculous. Physically, yeah, there was some days I was more fatigued than others, but I don't know. That was never the hardest part. It was the mental fatigue that it happened.
When you did go through those periods where every second felt like 10, like every minute felt like an hour, did you have a specific strategy or mantra you would use to get through that?
Yeah. To a certain, I would let myself go into the doubt and let myself think about it all and let myself think about quitting and just continue to let myself doing it as long as I kept moving while I was doing that. And the longer I did that for, eventually you would get to a point, it's like, okay, there's 1 hour to go. You may as well finish it now. And it was just this constant negotiation with myself, just trying to talk myself out of and into stopping. But I just made a deal. I go, unless I actually pull the plug, like don't stop and think about it, move and think about it. And if you just keep moving through it, all of a sudden you end up somewhere.
That's almost exactly the same as what I've encountered too with my own training. You can doubt yourself all you want. You can be as negative as you want. I'm not going to spend time fighting that because that uses more energy.
Mm.
So I might as well just keep doing the thing that I'm supposed to be doing while I'm thinking about that.
Exactly.
But did you find that as you were doing it, eventually the voice would just go away? Like you catch yourself thinking, what you're going to have for dinner? And you're like, wait a minute, I'm not thinking about that no more.
Yeah, it definitely happened for sure. Not always, but yeah, you would have, I guess, moments of peace where you don't actually think about how much you're hating it because your body almost like, or your mind gives up on it for a little bit. It lets you go somewhere else, and they're nice days. But they were rare, and I think it was also understanding the. So I'm very strict. I have this. I've created a story in my head where things are necessary, and without them, like I will not survive. So it was like, okay, it's Saturday. I have a 5 hour run on my program. I have to be out there for 5 hours. Like I don't care if my leg snaps off. I'm not allowed to go home until it's been 5 hours. So what's the alternative? Am I going to walk for the rest of the time? Because, you know, I'm already out. I can't, like, there's too much shame attached with coming back to the gym early or whatever it is. So it's like, okay, I can either walk and it's like freezing cold. So you're going to get even colder walking and then be just as bored, but, you know, not get anything out of it. So the alternative that I created in my head was worse than the suffering I was going through.
You created a worse reality in your head compared to the one that you had to go and face.
Yeah. Yeah. It was the old, you know, could always be worse type mantra.
It could always be worse. Could be worse, man.
Could be worse.
Yeah. Did it ever get worse during the run?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. There was one run out of the entire program where I cut it short. Um, I conveniently did it close to the gym, so it was only a short walk back, and I still replaced it with a bike that day. But it was the one time I just couldn't do it, just gave up. It was meant to be a 5 hour run. It was my last long run of the prep, and I cut it at I think it was just over 3 hours, and walked back, and man, that felt shit. Because
What was
because I didn't stay out there for the 5 hours either.
yeah, what was your mind doing when that happened? You had done all this. I mean, you've essentially been so practiced in saying yes to yourself to keep going. But at that one time, what happened that one time that you said, you know what, I agree. It's time to stop.
It was funny because it was, you know, maybe the previous 4 weeks of sort of building into those long runs, every run had been just full of that, you should stop now, but fighting against it. And this day, I think the run was actually going really well. And then all of a sudden I had one thought about it. I'm like, oh, I'm kind of over this. And I just stopped. And I think no matter how much we look at someone and think that, they're mentally tough or whatever, everyone has a threshold. And I think that day I just reached my threshold, because we only ever do what we think is right, even if consciously we don't think it's right. Like, there's something within us that believes that pushing through this doubt and this discomfort today is the right thing. And through whatever it is, the mental fatigue or, reassessment, introspection of what's most important in my life at the time, I got to that day and it just did not seem worth it anymore. I couldn't justify it. It wasn't rational to keep going. Going home that day, I remember I went home early from the gym eventually, and I made my wife and I pancakes, and it was like an epic morning. And I had time to stop at the convenience store I usually go to, and instead of just buying my drink, I stopped and talked to the guy for a bit and convinced him to do 10 push-ups that day because he's wanting to get into exercise. So we did 10 push-ups together. Normally I would never allow time for that, right? Because I got this schedule. So I just realized at that moment, I was like, I don't need to do it today. It's not worth it.
Do you mind if I ask you, and you don't have to be too specific, but you said it's not worth it, and then you went home and you hung out with Christina, you guys made pancakes together. Were the personal factors the main driver behind why on that day you decided, you know what, I'm not going to run today?
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah. There was, again, without giving too much detail necessarily, there was conflicting reasons to why I should or shouldn't be exercising to that degree. Mental health wasn't great. I wasn't in a good place, and it had been not affecting us at home, but affecting the general energy of the home and the mood of the home. And Saturdays, when I do my long runs, is also our date day. It's a day we devote to each other. And I knew that if I finished that run, I would have nothing left to devote to that day, and that was more important.
I think you touched on something really, really not spoken about very much in the elite athlete context. And that's exactly what you are. You are in the elite athlete context because you train so friggin' much and you're doing amazing things in the running space. Is how much of a toll it takes, not just physically, but in other aspects of your life. So besides the actual fact of it being hard, how did you rationalize that voice in your head that said, you're spending all this time running, and you've got all this happening at home, all these people who could do with your time, all of this happening in finances, all of these things. How do you make peace with that voice that says, you should be spending more time with these people, you should be doing more of these things, you're spending too much time just running?
Yeah, look, it is one of the hardest parts. And, sometimes it feels a little silly being so dramatic about it because it is all chosen, but it's chosen for a purpose and for a reason. Like, I devote myself wholly to the things I do because I think from that we can create a ripple effect that can benefit the lives of myself, my immediate family and friends, and the wider, population. So I think that I believe and I've experienced and I've studied myself and the world as best as I can in a way where I think that that sacrifice of, maybe not having an extra, maybe having 2 hours a night to spend with my wife, I'm able to become a better person that makes me more available for that 45 and then devoting all day and then making sure we go away with different trips and things like that. So that self-development, there's like a balance of how much time you need to spend making yourself the best person possible, putting yourself first so that you can show up for others in your work, in your relationships in the best way possible. Because if I didn't get the most out of myself, I wouldn't be realizing my potential. And that just seems like too much of a shame to not offer myself and hopefully in a positive way to the world.
When you spend this much time doing what you're doing with Christina, your wife, I know she's incredibly supportive of pretty much everything you do, but when she does voice her needs, which she is completely in the right for asking for in a relationship, because this is something that I used to struggle with, which is, you spend so much time training, and then your significant partner says to you, you're training so much, you're putting our relationship on the back burner, or it's influencing our relationship. I used to have this, I still couldn't figure it out. Maybe even to this point, I still can't figure it out. But what's the response that you give? Like how do you tell this person who you're spending like your love life with, this, I'm sorry, but this is something that I got to do?
Yeah, and I think it's important to note that even once you get to that point, it goes through challenges again. Circumstances always change. And to be honest, generally the initial response is like defensive. It's no, like I need to do this. It's not even trying to create understanding, but being able to step away from that and try to see the other person's perspective to begin with, understand like, okay, have I been acting in a bad way because of it? Like looking at, because we get stuck on this idea, right, where doing this much is making me this much of a better person so I can show up in the world. But if the person you're showing up for is telling you that you're not showing up in a good way, you've probably got something wrong. So you need to be able to like humble yourself and look at things from a bigger picture. Then there is a time where you try to explain it in a way that makes sense. And if that does resonate with that person, and again, my wife is amazingly supportive and will always listen to why I want to do things, we come to that conclusion. And most of the time, though, it's some kind of compromise. It's making a sacrifice to what I'm doing in some way to allow something on the other side. And it's usually meeting somewhere in the middle where we can both get benefit. 90% of the time when she tells me something, it ends up being a good decision anyway.
So you have to really juggle not only your training, but you have to juggle these demands on you, because you are part of a marriage, you are part of a relationship through thick and thin. So you need to have that balance of, I've got what I want to do, but because of this journey, it's also forced you to think about, okay, it's not just about me. I've also got to make sure that she's looked after.
And there's no way around it. It's hard. Like you've got two people that are constantly changing. Although things are staying the same, the individuals are changing. Our moods change, our needs change at different times depending on what's going on in their life and yours. So it's a matter of being able to do that dance together, like to figure it out where we are, because you're never going to be here and then just moving in this direction together. Like one's going up, one's going down. So in a relationship, it's be your own individual, but also understand that you share an energy demand. If one person is having to give more in either in the relationship or other areas of the life to make up for the other person, that's okay for a while, but how much can they maintain that? So eventually you need to let that sort of shift around, and the deeper you can connect with that person, the more you can understand that shift naturally and avoid those big explosion moments where something needs to change. It's like, no, we just dance together gradually.
Yeah, so talk about it openly, have it early before things get really bad.
Yeah, before the resentment builds, because that's where people scream, and we don't like doing that.
Yeah, we want that peace. We want to be in bed by 7 o'clock.
Yeah, I'm not compromising on that one.
Yeah. So, okay, before we move on to the Bali, like the actual race itself, okay, I wanted to take a slight tangent, and you mentioned that if you realize your potential, you think there's going to be a ripple effect on the people around you. For yourself, as you were pursuing this journey, what observation did you make on the people around you that you can attribute to yourself with you on this journey?
Yeah, I guess it's being on social media and utilizing that platform there. You get a lot of messages from people going like, "Hey, like I started doing this because of you," or asking me questions because they're curious about what I'm doing, even if they don't have an interest in trying to run 100 Ks. It's like, why are you doing that? And then from that you can share your perspective, and perhaps that'll influence their perspective in a way that brings them something positive. So there's many instances like that. There's obviously the fundraising effect that it had is it's creating an impact, and you start connecting with people you didn't know before. And whenever I think about connecting with somebody new, and I think about how much it's just benefiting me knowing someone else. It's like, hey, like that probably works both ways. So opening myself up to connection, which connection always comes with a vulnerability. It feels risky in some ways because you're giving part of yourself to them. But it's like, hey, we get to give and take from each other. So just that constant avenue that it opens up, those new breadth of experience is something that you can then pass on to others. Like it's like, yeah, testing out, seeing which leaves are poisonous. You're doing your part for the collective.
Yeah, not only that though, I'm sure there are many people who you don't even know are watching you going, what the hell? This guy's doing this crazy shit, running all these kilometers, and you'll never know that you've impacted these people. You'll never know. But there's going to be a guy who gets up for a run and thinks, man, that Daniel Lucchini guy's doing 3 hours a day, and I'm here whinging about 15 minutes.
Mm.
Yeah, but you'll never know. It's that
Yeah.
invisible impact you're having on people.
Yeah, and yeah, it's a nice feeling knowing that that's the potential, and it doesn't need to be true. It can be, and that's nice if it's not. But if you believe that it is, then that's going to drive you more, and then that itself can pass on to someone else who's like, "Oh, I'm doing this because like Daniel inspired me to. I hope he notices." And even if I don't, but they think I do, that's going to help drive them forward, or whatever it is, anyone around them. It's like not doing things for the sake of other people noticing, but understanding that it can happen and then using that as a driving force when you need it.
Well, I mean, for during our conversations that there's times when I don't really want to run, and it's on my program, and I think to myself, you know what? Dan's out there running today. He's probably doing his second session today, and I'm gonna do this because I know he's doing it, and there's an inspiration that I draw from that. But not only this, but during my runs with my running group, I will tell people around me, dude, I've got a mate in Perth who's running 85 kilometers in Bali soon. You should see. And there's people who are around me going, holy shit, let me follow this guy. Let me go check out this guy. So it's I don't think it's to be understated what you were able to show people that you may know and that you absolutely do not know.
Thanks for sharing that. It's been nice.
It's a crazy thing you did, man. But yeah, let's move on to the actual race now. Okay. You get there. So I'm just picturing it in my head. You get there, you go to Bali. Was it your first time in Bali?
First time in Bali.
Was that your first time in an Asian country like that?
I've been to Thailand once when I was 18 for 7 days of heavy drinking.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so Bali is a little bit different depending on where you went. What was your initial reaction like when you got there? Because you're now in a country that you've never been to, right? Different people, different culture, different food, different climate, and you got to do this race.
Yeah, and I moved to Perth because I liked the quiet of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I got to Bali and it is not quiet. It's chaotic. It's full on. I'm not necessarily the most extroverted person when it comes to meeting new groups of people, especially bigger groups of people. I get pretty socially exhausted quite quick. So there was a lot of like anxiety around it. And again, my training had been bad leading up to it in the mental state anyway. So I was feeling really low on confidence. But at the same time, it did start to ignite some of the excitement arriving there, the feeling of it being there, knowing that I couldn't pull out now because the last 3 or 4 weeks I'd had a lot of conversations with a lot of wise people about whether or not I should actually pull out of the race. It was very touch and go there for a little bit, but we got there and yeah, a little bit of excitement, a little bit of apprehension, but we were there.
Okay. How was your first training run in Bali?
Yeah, it was eventful. Yeah, so we got there in the afternoon and I'd already run before we flew there. Woke up the next morning at my usual bandit hour of 3 a.m. or whatever it was and went out for a run. One, it's hot and humid over there. Everyone talks about it, but you can always underestimate it a little bit. But luckily, I do genuinely enjoy running in humid climates, so that was kind of okay. But yeah, what was it? I saw a rat the size of my foot. There was drunk people everywhere coming out of clubs, and the amount of stray dogs over there that just start going off at you. And it turns out that 99% of them aren't actually going to attack you, but when you get there, you don't know that.
Yeah,
I was
yeah.
just like constantly turning around, running away from dogs. And then I nearly got robbed. Uh, Someone tried snatching my chain off my neck. Luckily, it didn't break, and he kind of just fell off his bike, and we were able to continue the run that day. So yeah,
Wait
it
a
was,
minute, wait. What happened after he fell off his bike?
can't say.
I see. Continue.
I ran off as fast as I could, and
Mhm.
I think it was meant to be a 40-minute run or something, and I went for like an hour and 15 because it did bring back the excitement of running in a new place, which I hadn't done for a while. A big part of my running journey was just the adventure of it all. So it kind of bring back that feeling. And yeah, by the end, it was actually I enjoyed that run probably more than most, although it was, yeah, incredibly eventful.
That probably helped the eventfulness of it all.
Yeah,
You
it
know,
was novel.
just yeah, just seeing the dogs, seeing maybe not the robbing chain part, but just
Yeah,
the difference in environment. That
yeah,
sometimes that makes such a huge difference, even when it comes to training at a gym. Just training at a different gym sometimes is good enough that it gives you a good training session.
yeah. Novelties, spice, variety is the spice of life.
Yeah, exactly.
The variety in how bad the footpaths over there got old really quick.
There's no footpath.
Well,
I
yeah,
don't know if you can't call them a footpath. If there's something that people can put something on, they're gonna put something on there.
or take it away. All the manhole covers are removed, so it's just big holes everywhere.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
How did you dodge the motorbikes?
Just hugging the corner. I actually found that although it seems chaotic, I never actually really felt like any of them were going to hit me. They're pretty alert and aware, and they're constantly dodging cars and traffic, so it's just almost normal. Although I had to adjust to running. It's more common to run on the same side as traffic over there versus here we run on the opposite side. So that was an adjustment, but yeah.
Yeah, I've always felt more safe in Asian countries crossing the road than here. In the busy intersection, Asian countries, they have this understood way of giving people a passage, whereas in Sydney, when it's busy, no one really does that. It's just you're in my way. That's how they think.
Yeah, there's an order to it that we just can't see.
Yeah, exactly. So you've got there, you've done some training now. Do you want to take us leading up to the race, or do you want to just dive straight into the race itself?
Yeah, I guess I'll give a little bit of a recap of what
Yeah.
the event entails too, because it is a significant factor. So we all sort of meet on the first day. We stay at a nice hotel. We all meet each other, have a nice dinner, and then the next day it's straight into taxis, and they drive us from the south coast of Bali up to the north to Lavina. And that's really cool for two reasons. One, that's when we meet the school that we're fundraising for. And, they put on a dance for us, like a welcome dance. They showed us their schools, and you get to see like they're doing math homework or math work on their iPads that we've helped contribute. They've got fresh water there. They've got a garden they're growing in. They're showing you all these things, and we get to interact with the kids, and they're just like there's so much joy, and everyone's so happy on that day. We're all standing there just dripping in sweat on top of this mountain, and but everyone's just loving it, and it's just such a beautiful, impactful experience that it's one thing to raise money for someone, it's one thing to do something to help others, but to actually see it and to be there, I think one, it gives us, a greater appreciation for what we've done, but it also gives something more to those that you're helping. You're not just mindlessly giving money or mindlessly thinking about them. You're actually there. Like you've shown up, you've flown across the country to do this run. Sorry, out of your country to this country to do this run. And I think that just makes the impact so much deeper. So that was amazing. Um, but then that drive is also cool because you're essentially running the route that you're going to run. So you get to see the mountain for the first time that that you've been looking at the course profile for the last 20 weeks and going, there's a mountain, let's see what it's like. And you get to see it and you see all the traffic and you see the monkeys and there was a lot of nerves in the car that day for sure. Um, yeah, intense. It was probably the hardest day for me. maybe even harder than the race day itself. Just sitting in the car and being uncomfortable, and we still haven't really got to know each other yet because we just met. And when I say hard, I mean draining, exhausting.
Right.
It was easy sitting down, but yeah.
Yeah,
Although
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
not used to sitting down for that long. I haven't sat down for 4 hours straight for a long time.
Oh, that must have been crazy.
It was torture, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's one of those cliches in life when they say life is for others, but I think you
Mm,
just described exactly what that means by you being there and seeing the impact you have made for these people.
yeah, yeah. It hit home. It really hit home because I had become very self-indulgent in that prep, and that was, I carried that guilt of not caring about the charity aspect, and that day woke me up to it, and that day made it really real. And I think things definitely changed a bit on that day.
Okay, so after this day, what happens?
Yeah, then we arrive at the Lavina Hotel, which is where the start of the race is. So it's a nice, relaxing place. We all kind of just chilled out the next day. It's easy runs and getting to know each other a bit better. And we had a breathwork uh, session together that was guided by a guy named Peter, who was with the group, and that was a really deep experience. It was a tough breathwork session. Tough questions were asked, and we were made to think about hard things. But through that, where we all opened up to each other and became vulnerable, that's when everyone connected. Like there was this deep sense of like, yeah, we're here and it is still a race, so we are competing against each other, but we are all here for the same thing. And we all have a story. And my situation that I've been experiencing during this prep is no harder than yours. We're all going through this together, and like it just created this collective strength. And again, that fire that started burning the next day just got a little bit stronger on that day.
Wow. They took the time to really nurture the experience for you guys. You're not just here to run a race, that you're here for something.
Yeah, yeah. We'll get to the race soon, but one of the amazing things about this ultra marathon is it started in 2017, I'm pretty sure. There's never been a runner who hasn't finished. And if you know ultra marathons, it's almost guaranteed that there's going to be people who don't finish, but no one has ever not completed this race. And that just shows how they foster that like sense of we're all in this together and we're all bloody getting there towards the end. And during that breath work, I had visions of that. I had visions of us all getting into our ships and sailing together and fighting off the winds and fighting off the waves. But every single ship arriving in its own time, like one of the ships gets there first, one of them comes last, but we all get there. And it's just as important that everyone gets there for whatever your purpose and reason is. And yeah, I was able to share that with the group. And that was, for me, it's like, again, that fire just keeps blazing. It's like, let's go, Captain. Like, we're on.
How did you balance that between I want you guys to succeed, but also I want to be first?
It was, I want you guys to succeed because that's going to help drive me to succeed. And to me, succeeding isn't coming first. Like I use that as a motivation to drive the best from me. But I also didn't just say I wanted to win. I said I wanted to break the record. Like I set this bar as high as I could, like fathom, because I knew it would drive me. So if somebody else pushed me, which they ended up doing it, a guy named Noah, he pushed me hard in that race. If he didn't, I might not have run as well. So I'm glad that he did his best and he had a great race too. So yeah, I think we rise highest when we rise together. What is it? All ships in a harbor, I don't know, tide rise together or something. So
A rising tide, all the
yeah,
ships
lifts
rise
all ships.
together.
Yeah,
Yeah. That's the one. I got you. I understand.
yeah. I think we can only get the best out of ourselves if we get the best out of others too.
Yeah, you're touching on the beautiful part of competition, which is people think that competition means you must shit on each other. But look, there is some element to that depending on whatever you're doing. But competition is required to push each other. It's knife on knife. You sharpen each other, the sharper you get.
And like I've never won anything, and I've never finished something and come first, but not tried my hardest and felt good about it. And I've never lost something, tried my best, but lost anyway and not felt good about it after.
Mm-hmm.
We put these placings or these target goals, but really that's just a driving force. It's how do we get the most out of ourselves? Did we do that? Did we give everything that we could that day? some days you just can't give as much. Maybe you do get an injury, but just because your time was 2 hours slower, did you still push to your 100% for that day? And if you did that, I guarantee you'll never feel disappointed with anything you do. Just give as much as you possibly have that day in all aspects. And life's, satisfying.
One of the mindset tips and techniques I give to all my competitors is stop thinking about what you want to do to win. Start thinking about under what conditions would you be happy to lose. And once you identify what those are, which usually just means exactly what you said, am I going to give it everything I have? Am I going to make the best out of this opportunity? Am I going to leave everything out there? If you answer those are the reasons why you would be happy to lose and you achieve that, then you're not losing, because when you've lost, you know you've given everything you've got.
Yeah. Before any sort of hard event that I've ever done, I devote 2 weeks beforehand to really mentally preparing. And that's essentially what I do. It's identify every single thing that could possibly go wrong from a performance aspect and talk about how you would overcome it and how you would find that 100%. So it's like, okay, what if I break my leg in the first kilometer? It's like, how far can I crawl? Like, you just identify every possible one that you can think of. I'm sure you can't think of everything, but we don't know what's not known. But yeah, I think having that mindset already, that regardless, you're just going to give it all, then that becomes the goal. That becomes the subconscious target.
Yep. And that's how you get through.
Break our leg in the first 3Ks.
And yeah, and let's not break anything. Hopefully.
Ideally. PRER.
PRER, first race, first place. So you got so many sayings, dude. I love it. I love it.
Some t-shirts made.
What's that?
Might get some t-shirts made.
Yeah, you should. I'll buy some. We'll sponsor the next group of people.
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, I think it's time we go into the race now.
All right. Let's day. So race day is day 4, and it's a nighttime run. So the run starts there's 3 start times: a 5:30, 7:30, and a 9:30. The more competitive runners being in the 9:30, so that's where I was. And that proved to be a long day. Like, for someone that usually wakes up and, starts running within an hour of waking up and it's finished before sunrise, even if it's a 3-hour run, that was tough getting through that whole day. So it was a lot of lounging around. I unfortunately woke up with a pretty heavy fever. Which
Wait, you had a fever?
Yeah. I don't actually think I've sort of mentioned this yet. I woke up that morning and I felt a little off, but I had every day because of the humidity and the pollution. Went for my usual walk in the morning, came back and just didn't feel good. Had a nice sunrise boat trip that morning, and towards the end I was like, okay, something's definitely off. Realized I pretty much had a fever. Body was, weak, sore throat, just the early signs of a cold. I'm not saying it was a severe one, but it was definitely there. So I went and saw the doctor that we had and pulled her aside, and I wanted to make sure that no one found out except the medical team, just, obviously to try and get some help, but also make sure they are aware. But I didn't want to create that as an excuse. So I was like, cool, let's take some antihistamines. Is that what you take for a fever? Something like that. Gave me some kind of tablet. I should probably know what it was, but I trusted them. And just sort of got through the day. A lot of, relaxing, eating with the team and just waiting around until 3:30, where we had a blessing ceremony. So we all got dressed in, traditional sarong and guided through a prayer and blessing from one of the priests. Very, very intense moment for me. Again, it was spend all day thinking about the race, but there's constantly little distractions. You're fiddling with your water bottles, making sure your nutrition's right, talking to other competitors. If you notice someone like they're feeling too good or they're anxious, went over and had a chat to them and try to offer, again, that experience onto others. And all day is distractions. And all of a sudden we have 40 minutes to just sit there in silence by ourselves and listening to the priest, but we can't understand it. So it's hard to really be engaged fully to that, but you feel it, and you feel this like collective, everyone going silent. It's this forced silence and introspection, and each individual is going through something in their head. They're all thinking about something, and we're all working through something. It's not the same thing, but just by being together, there is like an element of it being the same. So we're connected and giving each other strength and giving each other space and safety to go through that. I had some really powerful emotional experiences involving my dad and who's passed away, and it just, yeah, it was powerful. It was a big experience. And then, yeah, after that, it's try and turn that into race mode now. And all of a sudden it did. Like, people got jovial after. There was a lot of laughing and, nervous energy from the 5:30 starters because they had about an hour left and everyone else was kind of just there. And we saw off the 5:30 and then the energy gets higher. Then the 7:30 group goes and it's like, okay, we're going to go try and get an hour of sleep in and then get ready for the race. All of a sudden the entire 9:30 group just started like riling up, and we all went into one of the shared rooms and it's music blasting and we're getting ready way too early and hyping each other up. And, I don't know if you've ever been to, like, you would have been to plenty of strength lifting sports, but when the heavier sort of guys get on towards the end, it's the same thing. And this is the elite run group, I guess, not to take anything away from anyone, but that's what it is. We're all there to push ourselves maybe a little bit, to higher performance. So there's this real, you start letting the big dog out.
Okay, so you're real riled up. Way too early. Way too early.
We came out at 9 o'clock for a 9:30 start, did a warm up and realized we still had 20 minutes to go. So it was just a lot of pacing around. It was the first time I put my vest on in like 7 months. I was like trying to adjust it and get it all fixed up. And yeah, it was just a lot of nerves at that point. But it was probably leading up to the start of the race. Until that day, I had not felt any confidence about what I was going to do. But that morning, one of the guys, I said I was looking to pull other people aside. Someone did it to me. And he's like, looking good, looking calm. I'm like, yeah, I guess so. Maybe it's just because I'm super nervous. And he basically just said some words to me about, like, I believe in you, man. And that just changed my whole mindset about what I was planning to go out and do. And next thing I know, we're on the start line, all lined up. There was 6 or 7 of us in that group. And I all of a sudden got excited, not excited to race or to win, but like, hey man, you've been doubting yourself lately. Here's an opportunity to prove yourself to what you're capable of. Like, let's prove it. You've said it. Like, you've told everyone. People call you a savage. You call yourself a badass. You run every day. Like, wow, you're so cool. Fucking go out and prove it. So that excitement to do that was just like, yeah, we're on.
That's that voice that you've tuned in. That's the same voice that goes, "You're a fucking loser. You talk all this shit," and then when it comes game day, that's the voice that goes, "You gonna man up or what?" Like that's that voice.
That's that no option. That's that standing on the edge of a cliff and everything that's trying to push you over is in front of you. So what are you going to do? You're going to jump off the cliff? Nah, you're going to run straight forward into everything in your way. And that's literally what we did.
Amazing. Okay, so now you're at the start line.
Yeah, start line, gun goes off, and it was probably the first 3 meters was the only time I wasn't in front. Started in the second line, sort of quickly went out for a bit of a sprint. I knew that I was just going to start hard. My plan for this race, although my training hadn't been good, I did enough volume. I had plenty of volume in my legs. So I really trusted that I could push as hard as I want. And if it blows up, I could always recover and still be able to do okay. So I went out flying, and I remember hearing one of the guys behind me say, "All right, see you in Canggu, mate." And at that moment, I was like, yeah, like, I can't see these guys ever again. That was my thing, So I went out hard. It's the first 3Ks is flat. I was running at like a 4:05 kilometer, like way quicker than I trained, like just blowing up my heart rate, but just stayed committed to it. But I wore my gold chain that I always wear when I run, but I hadn't worn that shirt with that vest and that chain. So it was kind of rubbing, and I was starting to rub pretty bad. Like, by the end, it was bleeding. So I was taking my chain off so I could give it to one of the crews, because I was like, no way I can run with this for 8 hours. And when I was in that distraction, I hit a pothole and rolled my ankle. Took a couple of limpy steps, realized, okay, it shouldn't be too bad. I can run this off. Went like this, looked up to the sky and sort of, swore up, like, "You're an idiot. Like, why are you, focus?" Like, trying to remind myself to focus. And when I looked up, I happened to not be looking down at the next pothole. So you can imagine how great that made me feel. If I was frustrated the first time, second time wasn't any better. But yeah, that was intimidating because it's pretty much straight after that. That's when the climb starts, and it's a 20 to 22 kilometer stretch of road that you climb from pretty much sea level up to 1,400 meters above sea level.
So it's a
Um,
it's a consistent incline.
Fairly consistent. There's some really steep sections that flattens out a little bit, but it's pretty much never flat for that 22 Ks. It's
Okay.
always going up. It's pretty steep. Like some bits are up to a 40% incline.
Wow.
Yeah. And if you've ever injured your calf or know biomechanics at all, or your ankle, sorry, you can't really run uphill without plantar flexing very well, without being able to get onto the front of your foot and use your calves. And I had lost that. So it became a zombie march up the hill. I ran as much as I could. I did a wide leg swinging run on the steeper bits, tried everything. I talked about before how I ran with a broken foot for ages. In that time, I'd kind of learned to adjust my gait so that I wasn't causing pain. Because when I say I ran with a broken foot, I didn't just hammer away at it. It still healed, which means I just adjusted how I ran to suit the restriction I was given. Again, we can always do something. If your back sore, your arms still work. Well, front of your foot doesn't work. What about the back? So I figured out a way to run, and yeah, marched up that hill. But man, it was hard. Foot went numb. Had to take some anti-inflammatories, which kind of messed up my gut. Combined with the fact that it's 30 degrees in the middle of the night and 90% humidity, so you just, man, I've never been that wet. Like you could be in a pool and be drier than I was at the moment. It was
Wow.
just so much sweat coming off. And yeah, that was tough. That was a very tough climb. I remember I'm pretty strict at not looking at my watch when I run. I don't like looking at my pace or anything really. I usually have just the heart rate up and I don't look at it. But I gave in and I looked and it had only been 10 Ks, which meant I wasn't even halfway up the hill yet. And that's when the doubt really kicked in, but just kept moving, tried my best to get nutrition, but I couldn't eat and drink as much as I wanted. And because you're so focused like on every step and it's still new. Like I'd only run in Bali 3 times, but I'd never run on these quiet mountain roads where it's just the occasional truck and motorbike coming down these narrow roads, potholes. Again, every single house, pretty much, 2 or 3 dogs come barking at you. So it was intimidating and it was all so much happening that you forget the basics like drink water and eat food. And yeah, it was a journey to the top of that hill. And I kind of had the other negative of I went out so hard that I got ahead of the pacing car, not the pacing cars, the crew cars. So some of the crews weren't where they're meant to be. And, Christina was in one of the cars and she was kind of meant to be my main point of contact. So that because we have a system to swap water bottles where I never have to stop running. But I never saw her after the first time because I just got ahead. So that was a struggle, not knowing where and when support was going to be. Luckily, the team there at Bali Hope figured it out. They had a bike sort of make sure they could meet me ahead and they worked it out really well. So I'm super grateful for their efforts, but just that uncertainty made it, a bit more challenging as well.
How did you get through that doubt and anxiety as you're going up this hill?
Fear of failure, man. I tell you, there was nothing else to it. It was you're going to give up 20 Ks into an 80K run after all the training you've done and all these expectations people have of you. I'm like, nah, can't do that. And I guess there was that, but there was also that internal drive too, where it was like I made a promise at the start of that race. I told this story on my Instagram, but it was when I was young, I used to go to this park with my dad. It was down the bottom of this big hill. Well, it wasn't that big a hill, but at the time it seemed like a big hill when you're, 7-year-old kid. And we'd go down and kick the soccer ball around. It was one of my favorite things to do. It was like Sundays, like, can we go to the park? That's all I wanted to do. And we'd run around and I'd always tease my dad about being old and unfit and yeah, can't keep up with me. I thought I was this little superstar. Nothing really has changed there. And that would always be the case, I'd be getting to the ball before him. Now that I think about it, he'd probably let me, but that is what it is. He had a way of making me feel, that I was capable and pretty amazing. But then when it came time to walk up that hill to go home, who was the one that couldn't do it? Me with my little legs.
Mm.
And that's when I would make that excuse, like, hey, Dad, well, of course you can do it. Your legs are long, carry me. So he used to carry me up the hill. And during that blessing and before the start of the race. I sat underneath the start banner, and I have a tattoo to represent my dad on my forearm. And I remember just like feeling it. I could like feel him there, and it was almost like I was talking to him. And I just said, I promise you, I'm getting you up that hill. Like I'm taking you up that hill today. I spoke to my wife before. I go, if you see me, just tell me to get up the hill and then figure it out. Like no matter what, it was get to the top of the hill and then you can ease off the pressure if you want, but do that as hard as you can. And I made that promise, and I was not going to break that promise because I was chatting to him the whole way going up. He was always there, and I couldn't let him down. So it was get to the top of the hill, and we got to the top of the hill.
What was the conversation like?
It was just like letting him know that I could do this, like I could do this myself, and it was just having like normal conversations. You know, one of the things that I struggled with when I lost my dad was never having the opportunity to know him like man to man. It was boy to man or son to father, which is a beautiful relationship. But at some point, there's this like turn where, you know, I'm 30 years old now. I have my own wife, and, you know, I'll have a family eventually, and I have my own house and all these things. It's like, hey, let's just chat. Like, what have you been up to? Like, what's new? What are your challenges? What are your struggles? And I was thinking, you know, in my head, like some of the things that, because we look at our parents as being invincible when we're young, but being able to understand that, you know, you overcame these things. Like I look up to you so much for the things you did, and I didn't even realize like how hard it was because now I'm having to do some of those things. So it was just that like understanding and just having a normal conversation.
And he spoke back to you?
Yeah, yeah. Look, I potentially got to choose what he said because it was in my head, so that was nice.
You
But
never know though, man. There's so much of that stuff we don't fully understand.
yeah, yeah, like there was times where it felt like he kept telling me to look down, and on my knees I had two things written. One of them was get to the top of the fucking hill, and on the other knee it was the word relax, which they seem, you know, opposing or polarized from each other, but by relaxing is how I'm going to get to the top of the hill. So seeing those, and every time he told me to look down, I was, oh yeah, shit, look down, and also it helped not stepping in potholes
Yeah, that helps too.
anymore. Yeah,
Yeah.
too.
Well, you are your father's son, right? And he passed on himself into you. So it wouldn't be a stretch to think that you already have things that he would have said to you when you became the man that you are now.
Yeah, yeah, inherently linked in that way. So that was a beautiful, beautiful experience. Tough getting up there, don't get me wrong, but
Yeah.
yeah, I felt a lot of closure after that for sure.
Closure in terms of not having that opportunity to talk to him man to man.
Yeah, yeah,
That's beautiful, man.
yeah. Very, very impactful moment. And then all of a sudden, the guy who was supporting me mostly on the crew bike says, "Oh, dude, you're pretty much at the top." Because at this point, you stop looking at the watch again. It's just, you know, trying to get there. I'm like, oh shit, yeah, it is kind of flat now. So you've got this like 6 or 7 kilometer flat section at the top of the hill, and it's cold up there. It's like 15, 16 degrees. We were running through a cloud, so you're getting kind of rained on. You can start to see the lights from where you've just run down at Lavina, but you can also see in front of you where Canggu is, where we're running to, and it's like a bit of a blissful moment. And then all of a sudden you get to this crew car and they direct you to turn right, and you turn right and it's just a steep downhill. And man, like they talk about runner's high, I was flying a kite that moment, like just this huge rush of adrenaline. You're sprinting down this hill. You feel like, cool, I made it to the top of the hill. Because again, I convinced myself that if I get to the top of the hill, it's just downhill from there. It's easy because to describe the course, it's pretty much vertical for 22 Ks up and then a gradual downhill to the finish line. So I thought, sure, this is easy now. I've got this. And I flew. I remember the bike guy came up to me and he got to me at the bottom of the hill. He goes, man, how fast are you going? Like, that took me ages to catch up to you. I was like, yeah, we're on here. So that was a fun little stretch.
That sounds like a nightmare to me because I hate going downhill.
It was steep, darkest part of the course. It was wet. It was epic.
Wow.
Because the
Wow.
adrenaline, yeah.
Yeah. So at that point, you've done the hard. Now you're going down. Were you still battling doubt? Were you still anxious about what was going to happen? Because you still had 60 something Ks to go.
Yeah, so when I got to the top of the hill, it's sort of alleviated a little bit. It was more just like focusing on resetting myself now. I knew I'd hit that one check mark. And then that first downhill section, mood super high. Because then I also started, as I got to the bottom of that hill, you then start to run around this next flat section. And I've done all my training on flat ground. Not on purpose. I knew I should have trained hills, but mentally I just didn't have the capacity to do something hard like that. So I'd been running flat and I felt fast and confident. Although running hadn't felt good, I'd been running well times wise. So I was like feeling good, and I started to pass some people from the 7:30 group at this stage, or get close to them anyway. So for the next year, 10Ks, so from 20 to 30, I felt pretty good, and most of that feeling had gone. I was like, cool, I can do this now. But that didn't last too long, because not climbing for 6 months essentially, one, going up had burnt my legs out, especially because I was essentially running like predominantly on one leg. So my left quad was blown up already. And then hitting that downhill, and I ran it super hard. My quads were sore. Like they felt, did a heavy leg session and 2 days later you get DOMS. That's what it felt like 30 odd Ks in. So the doubt came back in with a vengeance. Yeah.
Okay, so take us to the end. Take us to what's going on in your head, what's going on in your body as you're reaching the final 20K and as you hit the finish line.
I think there's a significant moment before that. This was something that I'm surprised that I shared with people at the end, because it's potentially one of the more embarrassing moments for me. But it was from 30 to 40 Ks. I had pretty much given up. I just didn't think I could do it. I couldn't handle not winning at this point. I knew the guy behind me, I'd been told he was maybe 6 or 7 minutes behind, and that just didn't feel far away enough for how hard I worked. So I was like, I didn't believe that I could make it to the end. And I started thinking some really bad shit. I was like, started thinking about how can I get out of this? Like, how can I avoid doing this, but without feeling shame? So I started searching for a way out. I was like, cool, maybe I can run the wrong way, something like that. But then I realized, like, oh, it's slippery, and we talked about running downhill could be scary or whatever. But what if I tripped and hit my head and got knocked out? Well, they definitely can't make me run. Like, no one's going to be judging me if I was unconscious. So I contemplated picking up a rock and hitting myself over the head, and not to actually knock myself out, but to at least leave a mark, and then lying in the gutter until someone came and found me. And I thought about how I would convince the doctor that I had a concussion. And I thought about like the sympathy and oh, it's such a shame because you're winning I would get. And it felt really good. I was like, this is easy. I'll be sitting, because at this point it's still cold because up high. I'm like, I'll be sitting in the warm medical area, and I'll get to eat a cheese toasty and drink a glass of Coke and go to bed. Like, I've already run for 4 hours. That's enough exercise for the day. Like, it's over. But like we talked about before, I left that thought there, and I'm like, okay, think about it, but keep moving. Like, just keep going. And I didn't break stride, and I kept going. There'd be small moments of relief when I'd overtake someone, and they'd be like, oh, wow, you're going amazing. Little words of encouragement. So all of us helping each other, all those ships pushing each other. But I don't know if it was luck or if I would have ended up doing it or not. But I looked at my watch and I was 39 Ks in. And I knew that the HQ, which was like the halfway point, but also the main rest area, was coming up at the 42K mark. So I was like, okay, I have 3 kilometers to make this decision, because once I get there, there'll be too many people. It'll be hard at that point. I don't want to get caught doing it, of course. Like, that'll be the most shameful thing ever. So I kept arguing with myself, and I got to the point where I genuinely started looking for a rock and looking for a place where I could lie down without being seen by anyone. Or where I would be seen by someone, so that they would come and get me, so I didn't have to lie in the gutter for 10 hours. And I hate bugs, so I didn't want to do that. We were told about snakes and stuff there. And then as I was thinking about that, I looked up, and again, it had only been a few minutes, so I kind of run that far. I didn't run 3Ks in that time. I looked up, and holy shit, like, there's all this commotion ahead of me. What is it? My watch hadn't started properly. Like, it didn't register the first couple Ks, so the distance was off. I was actually already at halfway. And that moment, I was like, self-belief came back in. I was like, you can do it, man. Like, you're halfway. Like, just close your eyes, shut up, take this little rush of energy that you get from the people cheering on. Like I didn't stop at the aid station. I saw photos of after. I was like, where was that? I never even saw it. But I just ran straight through, and I was like, let's just give it a go. Like you're close enough now. You can do this. Like there's glory at the end. Get there. And yeah, from there, the next like 20 Ks were tough, but I felt good and I was in a nice rhythm. I had able to like fix up my hydration and nutrition that had got really bad. Started taking on a lot of liquid calories because I just couldn't eat because of my stomach. I cut to the chase. I shit myself 3 times during that race. Never trust a fart when your stomach doesn't feel right. But you know, it wasn't on purpose. I'm not that gross, but it happened, right? Actually, a funny story. I was talking to second place after the race, and he's like, "Hey man, did you ever stop?" I was like, "No." He's like, "Not even like to pee?" I'm like, "No." He goes, "But did you pee during the run?" I'm like, "Yeah, one time." He goes, "Man, I knew it. I saw it like a squiggly trail of the road." And he's like, "I'm sure that's pee." I'm like, "Yeah, I've learned how to pee while running. You know, no mess. It's good."
Yeah. Skill is a skill on its own. I think that's very skillful.
Yeah. And there was actually one really blissful moment on that. So we're running through this village, and it was this really long, straight section, just a light downhill. Good running, easy running, and I just sort of filled up, so I felt pretty decent. And all of a sudden, there was this group of 4 or 5 kids came out of their house, and they saw me running, and they started like running with me, and trying our best to overcome the language barrier and explain what we were doing. And they were so excited, and they're all filming, and they're, I don't know, maybe 10 to 16 years old, and they're jumping on and off the scooter to keep up with me, running in thongs, like keeping up. I'm running like a 5 minute, 15 kilometer down this road.
Yeah.
And they stayed with me for like 20 or 30 minutes, man. And no
That's
one was
cool.
around. No one saw it except me, and one of the crew guys saw it. And it was just us. And we just got to run together. And they bring so much energy and excitement. It made me think about, sure, that wasn't necessarily the actual community we're helping, but we're helping the community here. And it reminded me of that. And that was epic. Until it wasn't. Eventually, it was like I started to get tired again. So they became a little, it was intrusive. I just, wanted to give them my best. Like we talked about before, it's like I wanted to give them my best, but I had to refocus on myself. So I asked them to stop, and they stopped, and we kept running. And then it was a combination of being, from there it was probably close to 20 Ks to go. It was very hard, but at no point in that 20 kilometers did I have doubt. I knew I was there. I knew I had it. It was just how much can I push? So it was this constant reminder of like, dig, like you've got more, keep going. And I write a lot of things on myself when I race. So I had a few of them. It was more pain, suffer, and give it everything. And I just kept repeating those to myself every time. It was communicating with the crew about what I needed, asking for the help, getting more soft drinks in, and just going for it. Yeah, and I gave everything I could in that. 10 Ks to go got a little bit tricky. The guy who was with me as much as possible on the crew bike had to go and help some other people. And from then, there was crew cars still missing because, again, I'd gone out so much faster than anyone ever had. They just didn't have time to get prepared. Because it's in Bali, they can't really have permanent things set up, at risk of, people trying to take advantage of that and local knowledge and things like that. So from there, it was like just thinking I was being lost the whole time because I didn't know, as we're going through these smaller villages, there's a lot of little streets. So you kind of can see the main road, but you're not 100% sure. Again, you've been running for 7 hours, sorry, super dehydrated. But I ended up calling the race director, and they did everything they can to make sure I had direction. So again, I can't thank the Bali Hope team for how well that they work so hard to make us all thrive. And that was really felt then. And that's when I was like, I saw the race director and I said, hey man, like, because we talked about before that he like sensed that we could do something amazing that day. And I told him, I go, make sure you're ready because I'm going to go faster than anyone. And at that moment, I was like, hey, like, let's finish this. Let's do something special. And it was just, yeah, it was all on from there. Just everything to the thing. I think I ran the last 10 Ks in like 50 minutes or something. Or it was 50 minutes, 30 seconds or something. So pushed. And then, yeah, I remember I was told I was 1 kilometer out. So one of the guys like, hey man, I'm going to leave because he was at this point during the actual city, because people coming out of clubs, there's always someone with you for that last bit. He's like, hey, you got 1 kilometer to go. I'm going to leave you. Enjoy this moment. So I started really pushing hard. I was like, man, this is a long kilometer. Turned out when you told me, I was actually more like 3 kilometers away.
Okay.
So I was just pushing super hard, and I'd never been to this pub. We finished at a pub called the Old Man's, and I'd never been there, so I didn't really know what it looked like. And I have a terrible sense of direction anyway, so didn't know where I was until I saw the finish line. And man, that last like 200 meters is a blur. I don't really remember crossing the finish line. Next thing I know, I'm on the ground. Once I crossed the finish line, I just collapsed, and I was told probably 2Ks back that Christina wasn't going to make it to the finish line in time, which had two negatives. One, I wanted my wife there. But two, I have a love for White Monster. And they don't sell it in Bali. So in anticipation of that, I brought one with me because I love to finish my long runs with a White Monster. Is it a smart idea to have caffeine after a run? I don't know. I don't care. I like it. It makes me feel good. So the whole time I'd been making a joke to everyone, like, the most important thing is getting my Monster to the finish line and cold. But I was told she wasn't going to be there. But then I looked up and she was there, and I remember seeing the can in her hand, and I was like, that's alive. And I hadn't had one in 10 days, and anyone that has a caffeine addiction knows what that's like. And I think I poured half it on my head, and just feeling it now is like that whole experience of crossing the finish line and realizing that I did it. Again, not that I won, not that I broke the record, which is a nice, I guess, extra reward, but I knew that I'd given it everything. And it's probably the first time in my life I'd ever, or maybe the first time in my life, the first time in my running life that I really felt like I gave everything, like the 24-hour run. Yeah, I pushed myself hard, but I had a broken foot, so I couldn't really see what I was capable of. Like this one, I went out and I just gave it everything, like to the point where I could not cross that finish line without falling over. So I just felt that pride and that excitement. And yeah, it was amazing.
How would you, if you could describe the feeling of just being there at the end? If you could put words to it, what were you going through?
Like there's a sense of euphoria. There's a sense of like just immense joy. But I think the feeling that came right after that was the one that's the most impactful to me and the one that felt the best. Once that initial adrenaline, I poured the Monster on my head and I sit down to take off my shoes, and the commotion had kind of ended because we got to get ready for the next person, and it was just me again, kind of like the blessing ceremony. It kind of went quiet, but in the lightest way possible. I felt this immense weight, like all those doubts. I was like, can I even do this? Can I even push myself? Am I as hard as I think I am, or as hard as I say I am? So this weight was just lifted, man. I just felt light and free. Like, yeah, if I could put it into one word, it was freedom.
It's almost like a shackle was taken off.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, peace and freedom.
Well, thanks for sharing that, man. That's a tremendous story. So much that you could never ever fully articulate to anyone.
Yeah, experience. Words limit. Words have a limitation.
Yeah, but it's the only thing we have.
That's all we have to give, and maybe it's enough to inspire someone to go find their own ineffable experience.
Absolutely. Now, I wanted to go through some of the things that you wanted to talk about before we jumped on this podcast today. And I think some of these things you've covered already, so I won't go into those ones. But you said something about the illusion of discipline. Yeah, could you elaborate a bit on that?
Yeah, so you asked me before, like if I think it's discipline, and maybe, but like discipline, again, we always do what we think is the right thing. Even if in our head we convince ourselves that, we did something that wasn't that, but no, it's like there's something in us that believes that what we're doing is right. So every time we choose to do something that seems disciplined, it's like, no, it's impossible to not do that. Like we have to do what we think is right. So discipline isn't the key. It's It's creating a story that drives you towards your purpose, making your belief in your purpose so strong that discipline isn't a factor. It's just the belief is so real. It's a fact. Like, I convince myself that if I don't make it to the top of the hill, I will die. Like, I actually convince myself of that, and I truly believe it. There's no way I'm not getting to the top of that hill because I don't want to die. So it's the story is what creates this illusion of discipline. It's really, you're just a good storyteller. And I guess the way discipline can fit into that is like, how disciplined are we in creating a story that is going to benefit us? You know, I did a lot of running, and looking back in my prep, I probably didn't do it in a beneficial way. The story I created told me that I had to do 220 Ks a week. But I know rationally, and, you know, from as a coach, I know that I don't need to run that much to do well. But I convinced myself that I did. And I was convinced because of fears, because of whatever it is that drove me to believe that. I don't know that what it was. I didn't make those decisions out of discipline. I made them out of fear. And they weren't necessarily the right one. But I was able to adjust things early enough. And I truly don't think that that was my best performance possible based on that entire prep. On the day, I gave it everything I had, but the prep was crap. I wouldn't give it more than a 5 out of 10 rating. I didn't train well for the race. I trained enough to do well, and that's not to take away and, try to be this weird humble thing about it, like, oh, I could have done better, or cocky about it. It's like, I just know that I didn't train well, and that's the reality of it. So that excites me because I now know how much more I have to give if I nail those things, if I make the hard decisions.
Yeah, and which sounds like you should be training less from what you're saying now.
Given the context at the time, yes.
Yeah. Got it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting point you make, because I'm of the same boat now where I think discipline is very misunderstood and it's very overused in its application. I think a lot of coaches especially like to say that discipline is choosing to do something that you don't want to do in their minds, except what you just raised was you do the thing that you believe is right. And that's where discipline fits into it. Like this, you're always going to do what you think is right. So I think that's interesting to explore, because it goes back to something deeper, which is, what's the narrative that you're telling yourself? What's the reasoning behind what you're doing? Why you're doing what you're doing?
Yeah, I think the real challenge and the real skill is to be humble enough to be willing to change your story. To be able to take the objective facts that are being presented to you along the way and not block them out, and discern the illusions from the realities, and listen to others and figure out if others are saying something to you that actually could be true, if it's just serving their purpose. And I want this to sound complicated because it is. It's so hard to know, like, when you should give more, give less. Like, we don't know. We talk about work-life balance, but like, what does that even mean? There's no scales that we can just look at and figure out.
Doesn't exist.
There
doesn't
is.
Exist.
If you're functioning well, there is a balance, but balance doesn't look the same for everyone. Like, balance is a continuum. It's not a static point.
Yeah, I mean, all of that stuff is, in my opinion, just neatly packaged, sellable products. They're not really genuine ideas, or genuinely helpful ideas.
Anything that's fluid is hard to sell, right? But everything is fluid.
Yeah, so exactly.
We have to compartmentalize it to create products.
The smoother the narrative, the easier to sell. What do you mean when you say the hard thing isn't always what seems hard?
Yes. So for me, people look at how much training I do and they go, oh, that must be so hard. And in their concept of reality, that is the hardest. Like, I couldn't imagine training 40 hours a week. But for me, again, I believe that that was the right thing to do. So that was the easier thing to do. The thing that was hard for me to do was to do less, because I didn't believe that that was right. It took a lot of unraveling of that narrative to eventually come to the conclusion like, hey, there's some truth. So for me, it was doing less, which, potentially is the easier option in my head, because it is easier physically, sure. To do less training is easier physically, but it was harder to make that decision. It was harder to be brave. It required more courage and more trust and more ability to be humble and admit I was wrong. And admitting I'm wrong is hard. I don't think anyone likes admitting they're wrong. But that was the hard thing. That was the easy physical thing. So pulling back for that last 3 weeks, pretty much, it did help. It did help.
Yeah, it's not always related to the effort that you put in. Because when I teach people to meditate, some of these guys can work for 40 hours a week nonstop.
Mm-hmm.
Most of them more than most people, but you ask them to sit there for 15 minutes and do absolutely nothing, and they can't do it.
Well, ask a powerlifter to squat 500 kilos and they'll do it. But you ask them to walk upstairs and they start huffing and puffing. It's just a joke. I used to be a powerlifter.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, like what's harder, a handstand or running 200 kilometers? If you can run 200 kilometers, then 200 kilometers is easier than doing a handstand if you can't do one. It might
Exactly.
not be as physically demanding, but there's something about it is hard for you in your understanding and your context.
Yeah.
So it's doing what's challenging for you.
Yeah. Not what you see on the outside, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely. No, I understand that concept. And I think a lot of people, they look at hard tasks as hard for themselves, not as hard for the individual who's doing it.
Yeah. We project our own feelings towards it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
I
do it. I still do it. I mean, I did it with you. I said, oh my
Yeah.
God. Because I mean, I've run somewhat. I haven't run a lot, but I still have a regular running routine. And I think to myself, man, this guy's running 10 kilometers twice a day sometimes. I cannot be bothered for that shit. And I'm projecting onto you. But I know it's easy for you, just like it's easy for me to run 2 kilometers twice a day. Like I find that easy.
Exactly.
Okay. So we've got through most of them. Some of them you've already covered. What do you mean by utilizing the darker self?
Yeah, so we have, everyone talks about the shadow and, demons and all these sort of things. And once we learn to accept that they are always part of us, we can then start to look at them as a demon not being a bad character. Like you've got in The Wizard of Oz, there's the Wicked Witch and there's the Good Witch. The witch itself isn't bad. It's how and where it shows up that determines whether it's useful or maladaptive to you. So we have these, darker sides of ourselves, which, you can look at aggression potentially could be one of those things. I know it's something you talk about a lot, and it can be used in a really negative context, 100%. But if we can figure out how to control those parts of ourselves, not by suppressing them or getting rid of them or denying them or judging them for what they are, but instead learning how to get the most out of them. If you have someone who's terrible at math and you make them do math work all day, you're wasting what they have to give you and thinking that they're terrible. But if they're a great artist and you get them to draw pictures, then all of a sudden they're amazing. So I can look at lots of aspects of my competitive self or the competitive version of myself who in certain situations is going to be really bad. Like I won't get along with people. I won't try to help people as much. I'm more aggressive and more angry and less patient with others. So I don't want to do that when I'm, having dinner at my in-laws, right? I don't want to get into an argument with my mom about something for the sake of it. But if I'm racing and I know that thinking about the guy behind me catching up to me drives my ego to give everything and let go of my doubts and it helps me run faster, then hey, it didn't hurt anyone and it benefited me. So it's like finding the quote unquote dark parts of yourself and starting to reframe them and figure them out and learn when they are useful. And once you've learned how you can utilize them, it's you learning how you can bring them into that moment. And sometimes that means telling myself I suck or telling myself if I fail, people are going to laugh at me because that's going to ignite that competitive self and make sure that I don't fail. So no one's laughing. And even though they weren't actually going to laugh, it's using that, again, narrative.
Yeah, it's removing the label. We can label them as light and dark, but removing saying that good is light and bad is dark. It just is light and there is dark, and it's a balance. And like you say, as long as you integrate properly, understand which parts to use, then it's going to be to your benefit. And you're right, I talk about this a lot, especially when it comes to these, what they term as negative emotions. They're not bad by themselves, they just exist.
Yeah, we've told them, or we've told ourselves that they're good or bad.
Exactly.
And that's why it's important to have good people in your life that will tell you when you are showing up in a way that isn't useful, and you can learn through the perspective of others, because we blind ourselves to things. We convince ourselves we're doing something right because we want to be right.
Mm-hmm.
It's we all need to help each other through that process.
Yeah, and also the flip side is no one actually spends the time to acknowledge their light side and the downfalls that can come from that if you spend too much time in there. Yeah, like always being that positive person, trying to always be positive and nice and bright and free. You actually can turn out to be a really bad friend, for example, because you're never telling your mate, hey man, you got to pick it up, like this is not good enough.
Yeah, great point.
The last one is food. You have a lot of food stories on your page, stories through food, but for someone who runs so much, what are you eating? How much are you eating?
I love eating. Eating comes first. Everything else is kind of second in my life. I love it. But I eat a lot. To put numbers on it, somewhere between 6,000 and 7,000 calories a day, most days a week, and then Saturdays sometimes upwards of like 12 as a bit of a top-up day / eat whatever I want day. Within that, I try to eat. I eat in a way that makes me feel my best. As much as I would love to eat pizza every day to get those calories in a little bit easier, maybe without getting as full or having to cook as much or spending as much on food as I do.
Yeah, that's why I wanted to know how much you spend on food.
Oh, I don't even look at it, because I just would have a heart attack every time. So I just spend what I need to spend, and I budget other areas of my life and try to pick. It's enough for a family. Like, average male eats what, 2,500 a day. I'm eating 3 times that a day. So take your grocery bill and triple it.
Okay.
I like to eat well, and I love cooking. I love the process of cooking. It is my favorite hobby. It's the one thing that I do that isn't tied to my work or high performance necessarily, although I still get competitive with it with myself. But yeah, I love the entire process of it. So I eat a lot.
So basically, I'm doing the math. You're spending on yourself upwards of $200 at least a week on yourself.
Probably over 300.
Yeah, 300. That's a lot of food you're putting into your body, man.
Yeah. I'm really glad that I like eating.
I can't imagine it, because you know me, I'm not really a huge eater. I do like eating, but I don't eat that much.
Yeah.
To put in that much food would kill me.
I've always had a huge appetite, even when I was, before I was training so much. I've always had just a big appetite. I think that was something else I got from my dad. He was a good eater, so
yeah, it's good for running.
Great for running. It helps me stay fueled, and I could probably still eat more. So yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so we got a few minutes left, and we had some questions for you. But I think we'll just focus on these first two first, and if we have time, we'll go to the last one. The first one is, they wanted to ask about your nutrition strategy. So this one comes from Phil, who is one of the runners that comes with us during our run club. He said, what was your nutrition strategy for during the race and leading up to race day?
Yeah, okay. So leading up to race day, look, I'm incredibly consistent and disciplined with my food as well. Well, disciplined, we talk about that word. I've created a great story around food. So every single meal during the week is, relatively the same. It's got a similar amount of protein, similar amount of carbs. I change the recipes, but it's kind of the same. And I just make small adjustments that each week to keep the cooking and the enjoyment high, but the base is always the same. But then going to Bali, it was like, oh shit, I'm in a different country. There's different food. So, and for me, being a real foodie,